Hi, and welcome to First Editing. I'm JoEllen, and today we'll be talking about drafting captivating characters with character profiles. So, before we jump in, let's remind ourselves why it's so important to create a protagonist who feels real and relatable. It is all about emotional connection. And if your main character is kind of two-dimensional and if their behavior is quite unrealistic, there's a very high chance your readers won't connect to them and therefore they won't root for them, which means they're less likely to actually finish your book. So, in other words, you need to care about a character in order to be invested in the plot. And the good news is that creating interesting characters who come alive on the page isn't some secret industry skill. Actually, character profiles are quite common writing strategies. So, what is a character profile in the first place? A character profile is a sheet of paper or a document that includes all the relevant information about your character, for example, their physical appearance, their background, their motivations, etc. It's basically where you ask yourself, who is this person and what role do they play in my narrative? So while you might think that writing down your character's bibliography is pointless, because you already know them in your head, it's actually really easy to forget some details or motivations as you're writing your book. And it takes a long time and nobody's perfect. So, what's more, your characters' personalities might slowly get out of hand over time. And if you're not completely sure who they are, so for example, their behavior might change in order to fit the plot, they might make illogical decisions, or their personalities might be too similar to those of other characters. So this is why a character profile can first serve as a point of reference during your drafting stage. So you can always check the sheet so you make sure that your character would react or behave in a certain situation. And second, it can help you keep track of the character's wants and needs, which are both very important parts of character development, and that we'll talk about later in the video. And third, it encourages you to think more critically about your character's personality, which will naturally add some more depth. So, a character profile is also helpful when it comes to plot twists because you can jot down some background information about the character that it'll all be revealed later on. So, it's a helpful plotting device as well. And here's something you might not have known. Research shows that people can empathize with fictional characters in the same way they would a real person because the human brain struggles to distinguish between what's real and what's imagined. So, however, in order to achieve this effect, your characters have to be complex, nuanced, relatable, and in other words, you have to make them as real as possible. All right, so let's build a character profile together. The first thing you should know is that the shape of your fictional character profile is entirely up to you. You can focus on physical appearance, but you don't have to. You might want to highlight the character's mannerisms, dig into their historical background, or cover everything that comes to mind, whatever floats your boat. And in fact, some writers like to create a basic character sketch while others will spend hours puzzling over their characters' personalities and their character development. So remember that this is a tool that is meant to serve you, not the other way around, and use it as you see fit. So here are the 4 elements that you can include in your character profile. First, of course, is physical description. Though it doesn't have to necessarily be just about blonde hair or brown eyes, whatever that is, this is also where you can put in your character's facial expressions, their accent, their tone of voice, little quirks that only their close friends know about. And if you're not a visual writer, it's a good idea to find an image that represents your character in your head. For example, an AI generated image from Pinterest or something similar to that. Next, we have background information. Now, this is where you ask yourself how your character got to where they are, which important milestones from their past might influence how they act in the present moment, and whether they're keeping any secrets. So, while your readers may never get to know the full story, that doesn't mean you shouldn't. Of course, you don't have to write the whole bibliography. Just make sure that you're familiar with the most important events from your character's past. And number 3 is personality basics. This is where things get really fun. Usually, you can recognize a great character work when you're writing a scene with many different people in it, and you're able to tell who says what purely based on their lines. So those kinds of characters have such fleshed out personalities, you can easily tell them apart. You can get to know your characters better by writing down their strengths and their weaknesses, writing random scenes, test their behavior, figuring out their wants, their needs, or even doing an MBTI test on their behalf to see what kind of personality type they are. And finally, the last element is character development, which is an integral part of every novel. Your plot doesn't work if it doesn't change your protagonist in the process. In a way, character development is the most important part of your book. So you've got to establish two things here. What does your character want? And what does your character need? Their want is what motivates them. It's going to how they act at the beginning of the book. It's not what they actually need in order to transform on a deep level. For example, your character might want to go on a quest, save the world because they want fame and glory. Throughout the story, though, they realize that fame won't make them happy and that other people's opinions of them don't actually matter. So it's a quite universal theme, but the truth is most characters' needs are about the bigger messages that we all relate to as humans, like the power of friendship or the importance of love. And when you're creating your character, you're going to develop an overview. Try to include your character's narrative role, for example, if they're a protagonist or an antagonist, their involvement in the story, their wants, their needs, their overall plan for the development throughout the book. And here are 3 practical tips that should help you get the most out of your character profiles. First, check out different tools that make it easier to create your character profile, like Scrivener or Notion. You can use a sheet of paper or a corkboard if you want to be more traditional. And 2, try writing a random scene where your characters interact with each other to get to know them better, test their chemistry. And 3, remember your character profile is meant to help you, so use it in a way that benefits your writing process. Too much rigidity can sometimes stifle the creative spirit, so just do what feels right. And that's everything. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and if you have any questions, drop them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.